When it comes to basketball discussions, there are genuine hot takes, where most of the basketball community doesn't share the same view. But then there's an even more specific kind of hot take. It's one that's contrary to the popular belief, but it shouldn't be, because it's a fact and most people don't recognize it as such. Today, I'm breaking down my short list of hot takes that shouldn't be considered as hot. And let me know in the comments what are some of your hot takes as well. First off, Tim Duncan should not be classified as a power forward. Let me be clear, at times in the past I've referred to Duncan as a power forward, and I've even given him the label of the greatest power forward in NBA history. But after some recent consideration, I've kind of changed my mind on that perspective. Calling Tim Duncan a power forward is nice if you're a Tim Duncan fan, because it then puts him in a category where we can label him as the greatest ever at that position. But make no mistake, Duncan spent the vast majority of his basketball playing days as a center. Throughout all of his high school days and in his college years at Wake Forest, Duncan was the team's starting center. That was his natural position. The only reason why Duncan started his NBA career at the power forward position was because the San Antonio Spurs already had a perennial all-star center, which was David Robinson. And soon after Robinson retired, Duncan assumed his traditional position at the 5 spot. A lot of people don't realize this, but even with Duncan spending a significant amount of time at the power forward position while in San Antonio, he actually spent more seasons in the NBA at the center position than he did at power forward. When you add in his days in high school and college, then it's not even close. Duncan spent way more time playing at the 5 rather than the 4. On offense, Tim's game has always been a bit of a blend between a traditional center and a power forward, as he was usually willing to push his range out a bit with his signature bank shot. But especially on defense, he's always played as a defensive anchor in the paint and served as the team's primary rim protector, which is a classic trait of a traditional center. The only argument I can see for Duncan being labeled as a power forward is the fact that he played his best seasons at that position while David Robinson was still around. But by that logic, we should also be calling LeBron James a power forward, since that was his position during his peak years with the Miami Heat. And of course, absolutely no one makes the argument that LeBron should be ranked among the greatest power forwards of all time. From the standpoint of how we rank Tim Duncan on the overall all-time list, and as far as how we appreciate him as one of the greatest players of all time, this topic of his position shouldn't really affect any of that. I just think we should be genuine when discussing the greatest players at each position. And if anything, Duncan should be in the discussion of the greatest centers of all time. What's interesting though is the question of who becomes the greatest power forward of all time if we justifiably remove Tim Duncan from the conversation. Suddenly, it becomes a very competitive race. Let me know who is your choice in the comments section below. My next hot take that shouldn't be hot is that the gap between Paul Pierce and Dwayne Wade isn't all that big. Pierce was the one who initially lit the internet on fire when he made this comparison. And not just Jalen Rose and Michelle Beadle, but seemingly everyone was continuously roasting him for it. Even after all the public shaming, Pierce recently doubled down on a podcast, as he clearly believes he's on that level.
Put Shaq on my team, put LeBron and Bosh with me. I'm not gonna win one. You don't think? You put LeBron, and Bosh. We not gonna win one.
Yeah,
we not gonna win a couple. Like, who's the better 3-point shooter?
Yeah,
sure?
yeah.
Is he a better scorer? Is he a better scorer? Okay.
Listen, like most people, I'm taking D Wade in that comparison, as he was clearly the more accomplished player, and he was also the better defensive player. But again, the gap isn't as big as many people think, and I have no problems with Paul Pierce believing this. I mean, Pierce does make some valid points. He was a better 3-point shooter than Wade, and as far as an overall scorer, Pierce wasn't just good, but he was one of the very best. Over a 5-year stretch, from the 2000 to 2001 season through the 04 to 05 season, Pierce was 3rd overall in scoring. He scored more points in that 5-year stretch than Shaquille O'Neal, Dirk Nowitzki, Vince Carter, and Kobe Bryant. Many of those players were often torched on the court as well, like when he dropped 42 points against Shaq and Kobe while earning the nickname The Truth, or like when he dropped 50 points on LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2006. He was also a very explosive scorer when he needed to be, like when he dropped 46 points in the second half alone against the New Jersey Nets in 2001. Like Pierce mentioned, during his prime years, he didn't have the luxury of playing alongside of Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh. Sure, he had some quality help, like a co-star in Antoine Walker, but it wasn't until he got legitimate Hall of Fame help that he immediately won a championship at the age of 30. Ultimately, I'm taking Wade over Pierce. But unlike most people, I'm not laughing at Pierce or mocking him for believing this. He was certainly good enough to warrant this kind of confidence. My last hot take that shouldn't be hot is that Larry Bird was actually an elite defensive player. For those of you who have been longtime viewers of my channel, you've certainly heard me talk about this several times before. Unfortunately, so many people still don't get it, so I'm including it again in another video. For some reason, when you get an unathletic looking white guy, people just automatically assume he can't play defense. It's not just Larry Bird who suffers from this. Dan Marley is often a player who is criticized as a plumber from the Jordan era, when in reality, Thunder Dan was incredibly fit and was one of the best defensive players of his era. But back to Larry Bird. Larry Legend was the leader of the Boston Celtics throughout the 1980s, who were consistently among the best teams in the league defensively. That wasn't mere coincidence, as Bird was known for playing with intensity, energy, and effort every time he set foot on the court, and as a leader, he expected the same from his teammates. On an individual level, Bird certainly proved himself as well. In his career, he made 3 All-Defense teams, and in 1983, he tied for 3rd place in the Defensive Player of the Year voting, receiving as many votes as all-time great defenders like Michael Cooper and Bobby Jones. Not only was Bird a solid on-ball defender, but his quick hands and high defensive IQ enabled him to get a ton of steals, and over his career, he averaged 1.7 steals per game. From his rookie season until the 1988 season, Bird got nearly 1,300 steals, which is the 4th most in the entire league over that stretch of time. And what's even more impressive is that among non-guards, that was the most in the entire league. Not many players in the history of the NBA have ever got 8 steals in a single game. Larry Bird did that 3 times, including his 9-steal game in 1985, where he nearly had a quadruple-double in only 3 quarters of play. If Larry Legend had played in the 4th quarter of that game, then he likely would be the all-time record holder for the most steals in a single game, which is held by Kendall Gill with a total of 11. You also have to consider how Bird was a versatile defensive player, and with his 6'9" frame, he was very capable of guarding multiple positions. When his career began, he actually started as a power forward, guarding some of the strongest players in the league. Due to the emergence of Kevin McHale, Bird eventually moved to the small forward spot and started guarding elite wings. Simply put, way too many people say that Bird was a subpar defensive player, and hardly anyone says that he was an elite defensive player, but that's exactly what he was. At the end of the day, these are just my hot takes that I don't believe should be considered as hot. What are yours? I look forward to hearing your takes in the comments section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.